Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Piano Star Masterclass brought to you by Piano League. I'm your host, Brian Lin, a professional pianist and a piano teacher. Ever since I graduated from Juilliard a few years ago, making piano education accessible to everybody has been one of my main goals. And that's why I created this series, the Piano Star Masterclass. It's a 30-minute Star Talk interview with a guest teacher, followed by an hour of real-time, one-on-one virtual piano lessons taught by the guest teacher. During the live stream, you can ask us any question in the chat, and we will do our best to answer them. The Piano Star Masterclass features piano experts coming from a variety of backgrounds, ranging from experienced piano pedagogue, professional concert pianists, to conservatory professors, giving you a ton of different, fresh perspectives. And of course, you, your child, or your student can also sign up to be a performer for these classes and get a chance to perform for a live audience. To sign up, simply go to thepianoleague.com/masterclass. Now, I'd like to introduce our guest teacher today. Born in Kazan, Russia, Dr. Elena Nezhdanova made her orchestral debut at the age of 8. In October 2015, she performed Tchaikovsky's first piano concerto with the Sichuan Philharmonic Orchestra in Chengdu, China. As an avid chamber musician, Elena is a co-founder member of the Nezhdanova-Plechek duo with Czech cellist Dr. Roman Plechek. Many years of interest in and research of physiology of piano playing brought to her the opportunity of being commissioned to write a review of Irina Gorin's piano method, Tales of a Musical Journey, published by the Clavier Companion magazine in November 2017. She is currently appointed as artist in residence and collaborative pianist in residence at Janáček Conservatory Summer Cello Academy. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Dr. Elena Nezhdanova. Hi, Elena. How are you?
Brian, good. How are you?
Good. How are you doing in this lockdown?
Doing well, keeping busy. Actually, a little bit more busy than I was when we weren't on lockdown, but it's good. It's productive.
Right, great. I find myself being more productive during this time as well. I guess it's the nature of us pianists, always inside and working on our stuff.
Craft.
So since we only have 30 minutes, I'd like to just jump right into our topic today, which is about piano techniques and how to teach it from the start. First, I'd like to ask you, a lot of people discuss piano techniques in a variety of different ways. So my first question is, what makes your topic, or what you're going to talk about today unique, and what's different about what you're going to talk about today?
Oh, sure. Excellent question. So, well, I'll have to say a little bit about my background very briefly.
Yes, please.
To give an idea. So I was born in Russia, and I was raised there until the age of 14. So I was actually lucky enough, I guess you can say, to attend a elementary music school in Ulyanovsk. And our music schools are actually government subsidized, which means anyone could audition, and big percentage of kids will get in, and it costs nearly nothing. So of course it brought a lot of advantages that we had multiple lessons per week, different classes, play chamber music, orchestra, choir, you name it. So the one thing, I did grow up in the musical family, so I was submerged in the arts, opera, watching ballet, listening to symphony orchestras from a very, very young age. So when I attended the music school, I remembered my last teacher, actually, and I'm most thankful to her because I think she was the one who really inspired me wanting to become a teacher myself one day. And she often talked about how to create a beautiful sound, always striving for good tone, bigger tone up, perhaps you can say that as well, and always work on imagination. So moving forward in 2000, when I moved to the United States and I did graduate from high school here, I started teaching piano at the age of 15, 16. So I really, of course, was excited to had my first student who are actually, both of them just graduated college. And
Congratulations.
yeah, so it makes me feel quite old. But yeah, and looking back, I really only had access to about 2 books written by Russian authors. One was by Alexander Nikolaev, called The Russian School of Piano Playing. Maybe you have heard of that one. And Anna Artabalevskaya. And Anna Artabalevskaya often spoke about building the technique from the ground up. So musicality was always number one priority, and then working with whatever child you have at hand. So I guess almost like mothering them in a way. I also had an access to some American books, and I started to notice major differences of how certain subjects were introduced, certain concepts were introduced. And eventually I actually came across Irina Goran's YouTube channel because I was researching more about pedagogy, and that's how it kind of all got started and the circle came to completion, I guess you can say. Yeah.
Gotcha. And obviously, Irina Goran is such a huge influence on, piano pedagogy and piano technique in general. So talk to us about why you think it's important to start from the start, start early. Why can't we just, worry about, technique later?
That's also really a good question. The way I think about it now, if you think about other instruments and how young students begin their very first lessons, playing the violin, Suzuki or classical style, how to hold the trumpet or the clarinet or flute. So every instrument has its own, I guess you can say, initial set of rules of developing good posture, learning how to hold a bow or learning to hold the instrument in your hands, embouchure, woodwind player, I already mentioned how to hold a bow. And I thought, why don't we do the same thing for piano? I mean, on one hand, if you think about it kind of jokingly, you could come up, take a pencil, poke at a note, and it gives you a lovely little note, so a little sound. And then when you take all 5 of little stick fingers, and you can kind of play a little song, and there you go, you play piano. But yeah, putting jokes aside, I realized that a lot of initial preparatory work must be addressed from the very beginning and continued for future lessons to build on new habits from the very beginning. So I guess you could also say the goal ultimately is, again, in my opinion, on the piano, is to produce a beautiful and a meaningful tone, and then learn how the instrument works, learn how to connect notes more together in eventually playing pieces and be able to tell a story. I mean, isn't that kind of what we're doing for?
100% agreed. I think it's such a common problem that I see among students, that when they don't start with a good technique or the right way, then they have to spend a lot of time fixing it later on, and that's really a pain. So so why don't you tell us a little bit of your secret? What kind of techniques do you teach your students, and how do you think other young teachers out there, what kind of advice and suggestions might you give them in terms of teaching this technique from the start?
Sure, sure. I mean, I guess you can say that none of this is going to be a brand new, discovery of a brand new planet that nobody knew existed. So I'm sure from different angles, different teachers through different generations all, puzzled it together. And somehow, I guess you can call it the Russian school of playing, although there are still certain elements that perhaps are not so great, like forcing the sound or beating your students with the stick until they get it correctly. I mean, we don't want any of that, of course.
Right, but I've always been interested in the Russian school of. Can you tell us a little bit about,
Yeah.
maybe it's going to be part of your answers, but just what is the Russian school of playing? I always find it fascinating, and I see so many brilliant pianists coming from
Yes.
Russia. So why don't you explain a little bit?
I guess perhaps in one quick answer, you could say sound production. Learning to have the ability to listen to yourself, to listen to the tone that you are producing. Cantilena or the perfect legato playing. I mean, once we at that level, you feel so accomplished, like, yes, I did so good. My teacher will be proud. But of course, from the very beginning, and again, this is not just my research, but it's been around for a long time, how to introduce kids to experiment with music, how to experiment with sound. What is sound? How do you get a good sound, an excited, a happy tone from the piano? Or when you play a sad piece, how do you experience that sadness or emotion? Is it like a fake act, or is it something, you can actually feel? So for a lot of that, I would say introduce your kids and your students to classical music as early as possible. Do a lot of listening games, and actually makes a lesson go by quite more productively, I would say. Have them draw a picture, have them write a story. So they learn and gain the vocabulary needed later on to express themselves through music more. Some of the common approaches that I found, I guess you can say the Eastern European books by Anna Artabalevskaya and Irina Gorin, who actually, Irina now, I believe for the past 3 years, she's been teaching in China as an assistant professor or visiting professor at some Chinese universities in Chengdu. So what I've learned from gathering this information is relaxation from the very beginning. So some of these books do introduce, like, before you even touch the piano, we'll learn to swing our arms. We'll learn where the big muscles are. Now, of course, you don't tell all this scientific information to children. They don't care and don't understand. You have to turn it into a game. One of my favorites is, let's pretend we are Santa Claus holding the reins. So you tighten your hands, stretch your arms, and then you let go. So which one feels better? Tight, forced, or relaxed? I mean, even very simple things like that. So I guess just for our timing, I will move a little bit quicker. Sitting position. So how do we even learn to sit in front of this giant? Now, in our ideal world, I would love every piano kid to have an access to an acoustic instrument. It does not have to be a baby grand or Steinway, but just a good, solid, upright piano. To understand the mechanics of it. So when the hammer hits the string, the sound originates there. Unfortunately, keyboards, no matter how weighted they are, they just don't work the same. So we'll start with the piano. Then I also advise parents to buy an adjustable bench. You can now find a number of not very expensive ones. How high you're sitting. So one thing I actually learned from Irina, I thought was quite ingenious, is to think about where the location of your belly button is and match it to the white keys. So that's how high you need to be sitting for a child. Now, for grown-up people, of course, at that point, we figure out what feels more comfortable. You do need to have a footstool or a pedal extender. So if the kid cannot naturally plant their feet on the ground and they're dangling them, you absolutely must have something solid to have them plant their feet. And then if it's a pedal extender, they can even practice with the little fake pedal. And another thing, how they're sitting and their posture before they begin playing. If you taught for a number of kids, you may notice they immediately want to jump in. They want to experience, and it's so beautiful. But playtime is wonderful, but let's have a learning time, right?
Yes.
So through games, through kind approach, through perhaps even guiding your students' hand, show them how we're supposed to be lifting our hands. So where's the weight originating? Why do we need to keep a floating and relaxed wrist? And eventually it all kind of builds onto each other. Another, I think a very important technical, let's call technical approach is the non legato technique. So what in your opinion is non legato, if I may ask?
In non legato, in my opinion, would be any sort of it would be something that's in between a staccato and a legato, where you have to hold it for a while, but then it doesn't. Yeah, it's hard to define it, really.
Right?
It's hard to define it
Exactly.
in the yeah.
And that's something I also struggle. So like, well, non legato, okay, like you play it, let go, do a little jumpy. This is like very basic motion, but not really. So in a number of, again, the Russian books, like such as Nikolaev, one thing that I was always confused, because I actually didn't study the Nikolaev method, but I did somehow ended up having the books and taught from them later. But you will notice in the very first one, all of the note reading are super simple, and he introduces reading on the staff almost right away, and using only middle finger number 3. So imagine you play like Mary Had a Little Lamb, but you're only using middle finger. Why? Who knows? And so again, through my research and being introduced to Irina's book, Tales of a Musical Journey, then there's another wonderful teacher in Germany, Irina Mintz. She has a Hello Piano. They had some similarities about the non-legato approach. So what this means is, it may be a little bit too complicated, but basically, once we learned with the guidance, where the weight is coming from. So we want to imagine our arm being completely free. So shoulder is relaxed, and the energy, is floating all the way from shoulder all the way to the fingertip. So the students are learning to, you don't want to say perhaps create a shape, like you think maybe make a circle or hold the ball and it kind of fixes it in a position. There are other ways that we can explain this, but once they're able to play on the tip of the finger without collapsing the joint, which is another common mistake, right? So we want to dip the finger into the key by not breaking the wrist too much, and with leading of the wrist, we want to let go or lift it up. And it has to be very gentle, not pushing, not squeezing, not forcing, but very natural. So there are actually a number of toys and different devices that people like Irina and we're all sort of experimenting with our own takes on it, on how to do that. Tell your student an image of dipping your finger into peanut butter. So you've got a jar of peanut butter, it's soft and squishy. How would you, dip your finger into it? Or honey. So it's slow. We're listening to if it's a note, we're listening to the duration of the sound, and then we're gently lifting. I personally also like to sing with my students. So I have them, when we're doing these very simple exercises, even just on the black keys, sing on neutral pitch and see how your voice starts the note, continues, and then your voice lets go.
What do you mean by neutral pitch?
Like on or
just
yeah,
like, just without any syllables, right?
Right,
You
right,
just go.
right,
Okay, gotcha.
right. Or yeah.
Right, and we have an audience question actually about
Sure.
that. T. Michelle asked, "What age do these games need to happen?" So basically,
Oh yeah.
how young do you, how do you start, on your first lesson, or, after a couple months, or what?
Absolutely, from day one. They walk into a studio. Hello, how are you? Let's explore the piano. I'm not afraid to actually show kids the inside of the piano, because that's the first thing they want to see. So just kind of break the ice. So introduce it to the instrument, like play something for them, very showy, like, or maybe something very beautiful, and just to get their attention going. And from the beginning, again, in the ideal world, maybe now through Zoom is not as great, but you could maybe have a song playing or a piece playing and introduce them to these relaxation exercises. Say, okay, stand tall, let your arms hang loose by your side, and we're gently just going to swing them. I don't know, call a swing set. You can create your own ways of explaining it however you like. And then we're going to become a windmill. So your arms are raising up and, going up and down. Bend over, do the same thing, let them kind of hang loosely, just so the child becomes aware of, oh, okay, it's great to be relaxed. Do the Santa Claus arm.
Right. So basically the point is to really get the student to understand how important it is to relax
Yes.
your shoulder,
Yes.
your arm and everything in
Yes.
your body. Do you do these exercises often? Because they also have to play the music at some point, right? So
Of course.
yeah. So how often do you do these exercises?
So I'm still, again, it depends on the student. So if you have a very active child, actually currently I started teaching a brother of one of the siblings that I had for a few years, and he was 4, I believe. Boy, I mean, energy. He was under the piano, running around, doing all sorts of crazy things. But he has a perfect pitch. So I realized, okay, cool, let's explore that. So I would start immediately doing ear training exercises with him. So, of course, he would want to kind of start banging on the keys. So you could kindly say, okay, playtime is over. Now we're listening. So I play a couple of tunes for him, see if he can sing it back. And then we start to explore the keyboard. Now, because this kid had an older sister, he already knew, like he was almost teaching me. He's like, I know, I'll tell you where the low keys are, where the high keys are. So it's like, all right. But there are different ways that you can turn it into a game. Where does the bear live, or where's the elephant? Have them go for deep sound, and then little birds live over there. I do start kids quite young, so I'm not afraid to take a 4-year-old if I think that within a month or even 2 of lessons, they can settle down. Now, I have had a situation that had a little girl, sweetest little thing. She was so shy, and after about a semester of lessons, I said, why don't you guys come back when you're a little bit older and maybe, like the piano now, because she enjoyed listening to music, but you couldn't get her to do anything. But yes.
Gotcha. And I'm just monitoring the chat here. We have another question. KFA Lala asked, do they teach or use the Alexander technique in Russia? Are you familiar with the Alexander technique?
I am familiar. I don't know if they teach her in Russia. Now, keeping in mind, I was 14 when I left, and I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but it was a long time ago.
And I'm not going to ask.
Right. Back then, I've never heard of it. I think the first time I've heard of Alexander, it was in college, because some singers came and
Same here.
Workshop. Yes.
Same here, yeah.
Yes, but I'm a little bit know some things. Yes.
Right. So yeah, my college, Juilliard, also offered some Alexander technique classes. Unfortunately, I did not take any of them, but what I imagine is it has a lot to do with relaxing as well, and also breathing. Breathing is another thing that's very pretty important, right? Do Russian teachers talk about breathing a lot?
Yes. And I can actually show you one quick thing, if I may. So we call it or you can call it whatever you like, really, but let's call it traffic light. So first, you make sure that you sit tall. The bench should be moved further away. I want to sit on the first 1/3 or 1/4 of the chair bench. My belly button is with the level with the white keys. And then we just let our arms droop, very simply. When you're ready, we lift our arms. Again, we want to be leading with the wrists. Not my arms, just jump immediately. Take a big breath. Now, of course, I'm making quite loud, but that's for a purpose. And then, when you're ready to begin, we prep again with the wrist. Now, while the fingers are still on the keys, So if you can see, my arm is still a little bit involved. Again, it's quite challenging actually to do, but with a child, if you are holding their arm, you can guide it and show them exactly how you want them to dip into the note. So it's actually a bit challenging because you really want to control it and not control at the same time. So, and the same thing, let's say if you start with Mary Had a Little Lamb, right, on the black keys. So we only use a middle finger. Let me show you with my arm, right arm. So alignment, let's check the alignment. I'm trying again to lead with the wrist more, not, you know, like this, not flat fingers, nothing kind of crazy. And listening to every sound. Lift. So if that kind of gives an idea.
Yes. That was very, very. I wish it continued. Very, very magical. Yes, and yeah, I think the one thing about this quarantine is that you can't really hold the students the hand, and that's been really frustrating for me as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
The one thing, again, all of these ideas is not, you know, I didn't come up with a lot of them. I did some, I modified a few, but I'm really grateful for somebody like Elena Goran, who actually is wide and open on the internet, and she's very happy to share her ideas. And I think we're all learning from each other. But one thing I actually thought was also quite ingenious. She used a hairband. So girls, you know, when we go for a run or want to keep our hair away from our face, you let the hairband, I should have actually brought it in, hang it down. A parent can do it. So say, Mommy, Daddy, come up here, you know, let's turn into a game. So we're like a butterfly. So you take the hairband and move your child's arm like a puppeteer. Say, okay, you're a puppet, you're not doing anything, give me your complete freedom, and just do these sort of exercises. So, and kids love it because something different. You can also try, again, this is all you can get online, these cute little hairbands. So it's a hairband with a little butterfly. You could make one if you want, but like a little dragonfly. We also put it for very little kids up here. And I'm pretend with little butterflies.
That's the advantage of female teachers. I feel I don't own any any hairbands. I wish I had, but I might get some after today.
It could be anything. You know, I have also done with boys. Of course, boys are, I don't want a butterfly in my hand. Draw a cute smiley face. Take a little mark. It's like, okay, it's not permanent. We'll be fine. So put a smiley face and let them kind of watch their smiley face. You know, whatever. It's endless.
Right. One thing I noticed about, and we have only like a few minutes left. I definitely want to ask. One thing I noticed about Russian pianists is that they not only do they have a really relaxed posture, their hand is super strong. So on to that end, you know, because when you do relaxation exercises with students, sometimes their hand gets too relaxed and their hands become like this. What do you do about that when that happens?
If it's corrected and taught from the very beginning, and if a parent is present in the lesson and is willing to take notes and videotape and actually practice it at home, you will be able to correct this from the pretty early on. So the one thing I learned that is a good way, so I wish I had a partner here to hold me, pretend this is a teacher, right? This is my arm. So you can manipulate, like open your hand, close your hand, right? And then with my other hand, pretend the other one is free, I'm guiding the finger joint. So you can take it by the joint right here and pretty much play a simple tune, but you are manipulating the student hand. Then we could do the same thing with the second finger. And of course, you will see all sorts of crazy stuff. So fingers are spread out. You could say, okay, you know, you are little, I don't know, butterfly or something. Up and you relaxed. Yeah, anything. I mean, you can experiment. What else? Yeah, so if the students start to force the sound, and I do notice it quite a lot, they feel awkward and they're not quite sure what they're supposed to do. So let them experiment. And again, that's just my opinion. Let them experiment, but don't be afraid to correct in a kind manner. Don't say, oh, you got all wrong. Like, don't do that. It's horrible. Make them feel comfortable. So as soon as you see them not doing something correctly or you're happy with, be able to fix it on the spot, basically. But yes, the one thing you did mention about pianos having big sound, that's one thing I do agree with to an extent, but the more and more I'm becoming aware that young children do not need to be taught these things. Unless, we're born another Kissen who's age of 8 can play Rachmaninoff, that's probably a different story. But with regular children, let them learn gradually, let them all take their time. And when they're ready to play bigger, toccatas or little percussive pieces, then the teacher can say, okay, stronger, firmer fingertip, more arm. Always support with the arm. But that's my opinion.
Understood. So you would prioritize relaxation over. Well, I mean, both are important, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not like relaxation that you will let your fingers be like noodles. No, we're not talking about it. You should be able to sustain the weight, the natural weight of the arm, all the way from shoulder on one fingertip. And so while we were practicing those little songs using just the middle finger, kids learn about the alignment. They learn that, yes, you can play deeper, and then you do 2-note slurs, or I'm kind of out of focus, 2-note slur, 3-note slurs, how we're using the entire arm to travel. And it's not going to be, like droopy or noodle hands, I call them. So,
or spaghetti fingers.
Exactly, spaghetti fingers. Yeah, I only encountered that with transfer students, to be honest with you, who haven't had that foundation from the beginning. So,
right. Those are the type of students that I experience as well. When they transfer from outside, sometimes you have to fix a bit of things. Yeah. But great.